Hello to you, my very best friend. Welcome to one of, I'm sure, millions of YouTube videos uploaded today. In this one in particular, I'm going to be talking about the niche fragrance brand Dora, whose discovery set I've got right here. For the last week and a half or so, I've been running a March Madness style bracket over on my TikTok channel, where I've been pitting each of these 9 fragrances against each other and seeing which one comes out on top. It's been a lot of fun. I'll link that in the description. Today I'm going to rank all 9 of Dora's fragrances from the ones I like the least to the ones I like the most, and I want to specify that these are what I like the most. This is purely my own subjective thoughts, and I'm saying this because I have some pretty controversial takes coming up, but we'll get to that in a bit. Now, very briefly, I wanted to talk about Dora's fragrances sort of as a whole. I would say about 8 of the 9 are unisex, and really that 9th one we'll get to in a bit, but you could probably wear that regardless of where you are on the gender spectrum. They're also very long-lasting. Sometimes I was getting 8 to 12 hours, if not more, out of certain fragrances. Of course, everybody's skin chemistry is different, and I can't guarantee all of that for you, but for me, all of their offerings were really long-lasting. I also wanted to say that, and this is tough to describe, but for the most part, Dora's fragrances are lighter. They're more airy. This isn't to say that they're not strong, which they are, but you can tell sort of in the way that they're composed that they are not meant to be edgy. They're all very smooth. Even the ones that do project out pretty far, they have no rough edges. There's nothing in them that anyone is going to find offensive. It is a very purposeful mix of strength and subtlety. There's definitely some good quality here. These aren't necessarily beasts, they're not going to fill a room, but they do still project fairly nicely and last for quite a while. So with all that said, let's get into the list itself, starting with number 9, the fragrance that I liked by far the least. That is going to be Mallow. Now, going into the bracket, I actually knew very little about Dora. I had heard the names of some of their fragrances in big influencers videos. I had seen the bottles, I thought those were really cool. And when I started this series on my TikTok channel, I purposefully avoided influencing myself. I tried to go in knowing as little about every fragrance as I could. Mallow was the one that I had heard the most about. It was the one that I had seen the most hype for, and it was one that I was probably the most excited for. And it brings me no joy to say that this was the one Dora fragrance that I actively disliked wearing. As the name Mallow would suggest, it is supposed to smell like marshmallows. There's supposed to be a boozy raspberry caramel element to it. I got none of that. On my skin, Mallow smelled like when you're at the dentist's office and they give you that fluoride rinse and you swish it around and then spit it out. It smelled like that mixed with the smelly markers that I used when I was in elementary school. Everything I said earlier about the Dora fragrances not being super harsh, being very well-rounded, that does not apply to Mallow. Mallow is incredibly harsh, incredibly synthetic, and it smells cheap. And this is not a cheap fragrance. You're pushing $250 to smell like synthetic chemicals. And this is so beloved online that I'm actually concerned that I got something wrong. Like maybe the sample was wrong, or I don't know what the problem was, but I just did not like this at all. And the most annoying thing is that I put this on and then put my jacket on, and even now, like 2 weeks later, I can still smell it on my sleeves. Ugh. Anyways, Mallow, I did not care for it. I know a lot of people love it, but I'm gonna give it a 1.5 out of 10. Okay, next up at number 8, we have Griasque. Griasque smells like a herb garden. That's it. It smells like basil and mint and just a little bit of musk. I don't know. That's it. That's all it smells like. I don't have much more to say about it. I've never personally been a fan of savory fragrances. I've never been a fan of green fragrances. If you are, this one certainly smells nice, but it's just not for me. I'm gonna give Griasque a 4.5 out of 10. Next up at number 7, we have Gladiator. I went in thinking that Gladiator was going to smell like Ventus. It does not. If anything, it smells like Sauvage. It definitely smells like a better version of Sauvage. I think it takes the elements of Sauvage that most people like and it amps those up, and it mixes that with a lot of mint. Personally, I've never been much of a mint fan. It gets kind of toothpastey, especially at the beginning. If that's the kind of scent profile you're looking for, I think this is a great option. I think this would be a great fresh fragrance for the summers, something that people would find familiar but also unique. But for me, as someone who's not really a Sauvage stan, who doesn't like mint, I thought this one one was just okay. I'll probably happily wear the rest of the 1.5 milliliter sample I have and then never think about it again. I'm gonna give Gladiator a 6.5 out of 10. Okay, at number 6, we have another Sora Dora that's fairly beloved in the community, and I'm sorry to have it this low, but 6th on my list is Jany. The first time I put Jany on, I thought that it was in the Angel Share genre. Specifically, I thought it smelled a fair bit like Lattafa's Khamra. It's got that boozy apple pie smell that's fairly common in gourmands at the moment, and on the first wearing, I liked it a fair bit. But then the next time I wore it, it got very nutty. It got very almondy, and I looked it up later and found out that there's actually something in the notes that is just nutty notes, and as the wearings went on, that became super prevalent. I know a lot of people love this one, and I can see why, but on my skin it just got too nutty, and that's not totally the vibe that I want to give off with my fragrances. If I want a gourmand, I want that sweet apple pie aspect. I don't know, I have nothing against the smell of nuts and almonds, but for me it was just so overpowering that was really all I was smelling. So I'm still giving Jany a 7 out of 10. It's still scoring very well. Like I said, not a bad fragrance even in the least bit. It just doesn't jive with me on a personal level. Okay, at number 5 we have Vanuatu. Vanuatu is Sora Dora's take on Gris Charnel. Whether they say that explicitly or not, it's obvious as soon as you smell it. Now, it is not a one-to-one copy. Vanuatu lowers the woodiness of Gris Charnel, and in its place, it fills that gap with citrus and fruits. Where Gris Charnel has a cozy, rainy day sort of feel to it, Vanuatu has a more outgoing, fun take on it. Now, here's the thing. I think Gris Charnel is a 10 out of 10 fragrance. I absolutely love it, and I would call it a nearly perfect fragrance. Actually, scratch that. I would call it a perfect fragrance. There's no nearly about it. So my problem with Vanuatu is that they are messing with a perfect fragrance. By removing that woody aspect to it, it sort of takes away not only the things that I like about Gris Charnel, but I think what makes it unique and what has made it the phenomenon that it is, and it doesn't really improve it. It's just the same thing, but not as good. So for that reason, Vanuatu is 5th. It's still a very good fragrance. I'll happily give it a 7.5 out of 10. Okay, at number 4, we have what I think is Sora Dora's most interesting fragrance. That is Camel Oud. Now, to me, Camel Oud is a mix of Tom Ford's Ombre Leather and PDM's Haltane, with a whole bunch of spices thrown in there. It is a very harsh leather mixed with a very harsh oud mixed with taco seasoning. I wouldn't say that I don't like this fragrance, but I also don't like it. I'm really not a leather fan, and this is super in-your-face leather, and it's got a wildly stinky aspect to it. That taco seasoning smell comes off kind of like BO, and while it is kind of gross, it's also interesting. It's not something that I am smelling and going, this smells good, but it's something that is drawing me in nonetheless. More than anything, I applaud Sora Dora for taking a risk. This is a type of fragrance that 95% of the population is not going to like, and yet they still put it out. Now, I don't love this fragrance, but it is objectively very well made, and I think if this is the type of scent profile that you like, you are going to like this a lot. It's super weird, super out there, but it is so interesting and so well composed that I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10. Okay, moving up into the top 3. At number 3, we have Orchidée Rouge. I really like this fragrance. This comes across in 2 ways. At its forefront, it has a lot of vanilla and almond, and just a little bit of florals and a little bit of cinnamon, and at first sniff, if you're just getting it in the air, just wafts of it coming up to your nose from far away, it definitely comes across like suntan lotion. But if you sit there with it and you really, really smell it, and you think about what it is you're smelling and how it's making you feel, it comes across really beautifully dark and resinous. There's elemi resin and benzoin in there, and that's supported, I think, by the heliotrope. It's really, really beautiful. I can see this not being up to everyone's specific taste. It's so weird, and it really doesn't make sense how it walks the line between being very simple and also very complex. I think it's just really excellent perfumery. I also think it's important to note that this is probably the softest of all the Sora Dora fragrances. This is not going to offend anybody. Again, it's like I was trying to explain before. It's not that it doesn't project, because it does project okay, but this is just a very relaxed, very quiet scent. While you're wearing this, I don't think that anyone is going to compliment you on how good you smell. They might not even clock it as a fragrance that you're wearing, but they're gonna think it. Subconsciously, they're gonna realize, yeah, that person smells pretty darn good. So Orchidee Rouge comes in third. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Okay, second place, runner-up, we have Broceliande. Now, Broceliande was a fragrance that I took an immediate liking to, but I really just did not understand what was going on with it. I wore it 3 times before I finally looked at the notes, and I realized why I was so confused. It's kind of a mix of citrus and florals with a little bit of cinnamon and a little bit of rum. Or at least, that's what I thought. As it turns out, there's actually almost no florals in this at all. Or at least there's none listed in the notes. There might be in the ingredients, I'm not sure. But the florals that I thought I was smelling, turned out it's actually animalics. There's a fair bit of civet and castoreum in this one. Now, I would never claim to be an expert. I would never say that I have an incredible nose. But I've smelled my fair share of fragrances before, and the fact that I could not place this one to save my life goes to show really how well blended this is. The animalics in this one are super smooth, very interesting. They take what would otherwise be a fairly simple fragrance and really elevate it to something new and unique. I think this is a very special fragrance. I think it's very versatile, and I think this might be one of the most mass appealing animalics ever made. It's truly just a really great fragrance, really great perfumery. This is I will also give this one a 9 out of 10. And lastly, my absolute favorite from Dora, what I personally think is the best of their fragrances. At number 1, we have Mandorle. Mandorle I would describe as a cherry amaretto sitting in a baseball glove. It is cherry and almond and rum and leather. And it was very surprising to me that this was my number 1 because if you'll go back a few minutes ago, I'm not a huge leather guy. Leather fragrances have just never really appealed to me, and it's oftentimes been a note that has caused me to not like a fragrance. But something about Mandorle is just so different. Actually, on the first day that I wore it, as soon as it wore off my skin, I went and sprayed it on a second time. This is one that I immediately fell in love with. Even though I don't like leather, this is, again, just so well blended. The cherry mixes perfectly with the leather, and the leather mixes perfectly with the almond, and the almond mixes perfectly with the rum, and the rum mixes perfectly with the cherry, and so on. Even though there's those different facets, those different notes that come together, it still smells like one cohesive thing. I think if you're interested in cherry fragrances, definitely check this out. Don't be scared by the leather note. As a certified leather hater, I really like this one a whole lot. To me, Mandorle is an easy 10 out of 10. So there you have it. All 9 Doras rank from worst to best. Let me know what Doras are your favorite. Let me know how mad I made you by putting Jany that low in the list. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you take care until the next video. Okay, bye.